All right, let's go ahead and stand for the pledge and the prayer by Travis and Cody.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kind of most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to gather here once again. Dear Heavenly Father, give us the wisdom as we begin to prepare for the next school year and finish up some of the projects that are coming this summer. Pray that you'll watch over us, lead, guide, and direct us, give us wisdom, and help us with any questions that are presented, and help us guide us through this process. For your precious Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, let's call the meeting to order. Mr. Sue, do you have some additions to the agenda?
We have one, Mr. McKinney, under the discussion you have a continuing resolution that Ms. Treadway is going to present, and we will need to approve that in our action section. So if you would add that as perhaps B, and then slide the others down.
Okay.
That is really all that we need to add.
All right, do we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
motion.
Second.
All right, all those approved by raising their hand? All right, so moved. Mr. Sale, discussion items.
This evening traditionally is to help us close out our budget year. Of course, we have some other things that are on our agenda for tonight because we have quite a bit of personnel that we need to look at. But we need to start with our budget amendments and the continuing resolution, which I just mentioned. So Ms. Treadway will go through that with you.
Good evening. So these are our final budget amendments for the fiscal year 2020-2021. And for our state public school fund, we are needing to make an amendment to increase revenue $303,147.75. And the majority of that is for our guaranteed allotments. Throughout the year, you see where we're showing a negative balance in a couple of our programs, and those are for guaranteed allotments such as positional allotments and also for our annual leave and longevity payouts. So of the $303,147, $281,013.75 is for those guaranteed allotments. The other $22,134 is for our Indian gaming allotment for this year for textbooks. The remainder of any amendments are just reallocation by purpose code. In our Fund 2, which is our local current expense, most of this was just a reallocation, mainly between object codes, not even purpose code. But also I reduced our county appropriation and our regular instructional services by $79,900. That was for our reading assistance, and since we started that program later in the year, we didn't have a full annual year of that, so we will not receive the revenue. They did it on a reimbursement basis, so I just reduced that back so to show it as actual. On Fund 3 for our federal programs, we had an increase in revenue of $16,999, and that was just some reallocations that DPI did just for various federal programs. And the rest of these are, once again, just reallocating by purpose code for our final adjustments. Fund 4 for our capital, we had an increase in debt service of $189,670, and that was just the debt service related to the yellow buses. I had brought an amendment before for the actual purchase of the yellow buses, which the state does on our behalf. We just have to budget for it on our books as well. But then we also have to budget for the debt related to the installment payments on those buses. An additional $38,741 was budgeted for county appropriation, and that was just to adjust the actual based on the actual expenditures that the county made on our behalf for the high school project, and then also for middle school for the cafeteria. They did some engineering work
Yes.
for the middle school cafeteria, and that was $23,600 that the county paid for that, and then an additional $15,000 for, I think it's for the doors at the high school for the security, the swipe
Swipe locks.
locks. Yep.
Yes.
Fund 5, which is our child nutrition, just had some adjustments there, just to budget to actual, and also we pay a portion of the director's salaries out of the state public school fund, so had to make those adjustments and budget for that, and then also made an adjustment to increase indirect costs just because of the increase of any expenditures. There's also an increase in indirect cost, which usually they don't pay the full indirect cost, so I'd increase that to budget some additional there. And then finally, Fund 8, our special revenue fund. Once again, most of this was just to reallocate by purpose code, but we also had an additional $21,639.75 for state grants. The middle school received a GO grant from the Wildlife Resource Commission, and they're going to be doing some outdoor classrooms, and so that's $13,789 for that. And then we received an additional $7,850 from the Department of Health and Human Services for COVID for our pre-K. And that is it for the budget amendments. Do y'all have any questions? So next would be our resolution for the 21-22 fiscal year. We currently do not have a state budget. The Senate has put forth a budget, but the House has not yet put forth their budget. So we're waiting on the state budget to pass. So we're asking that you approve this coming year to do a continuing resolution to appropriate at the current year 2021 levels of purchasing expenditures, so that we could continue to pay payroll and just ordinary expenses in the coming year for 21-22. That's it.
It doesn't look like we're going to have a state budget before September, the way that the parties are, not the parties, but the two groups are moving between the House and the Senate right now, because they'll have to come to a resolution on that. The word I got yesterday was September.
Okay.
Thank-
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Brett.
I brought to you a couple of months ago several board policies. Some were minor changes, some were moderate, some I consider to be major. I sent policy 6125 to Campbell Shatley, and that is the one that has to do with medication, passing out medications in school. And there was a line in there that Carol Shell has asked that we change from not having controlled substances, or having controlled substances stored in one place. She wanted that changed to any kind of medication that is stored at school. So it won't say controlled substance, it would say stored medication instead. And so all of those wrapped together. She feels like that is more inclusive and is a better statement. Campbell Shatley said that that's a small change and that's fine. 2310 has to do with board meetings. And in the policy that was sent to us, it says that public comment would be at the beginning of the meeting. Traditionally, we've held it at the end. I've gotten permission from Campbell Shatley to change that as well. If that is what you want to do, that would keep us in the same pattern that we've had for years. And then 3300 has to do with the definition of when a student is considered to be within the instruction of a teacher. And we had the option of removing the word only, and it placed instruction only happening during the school day. But I am convinced that instruction, whenever you are with a teacher, can happen at any time. And that allows us to broaden that. So I have requested that we remove the word only. Campbell Shatley says that's fine. Other than that, this is the second reading of all of those policies, and if you have any discussion on those, this would be a time to go through them. Anyone? Okay. Then we'll bring those up for a vote in just a little while, if that's okay with y'all. The only one that we really probably do need to spend just a minute on is policy number 4400. That's because it has some significant change. And before we go into that, I want to talk to you just a second about the difference in board policy and administrative regulation. You may look in our board policy manual online and see that there are two policies that actually appear almost twice. They appear with a number, and then one immediately afterwards appears with the same number, -R. The -R is an administrative regulation, which means this is how we will be administering the policy that comes right before it. It's instructions. Policy 4400, Mr. Sutton, or Dr. Sutton and I have looked at along with a few other people, and we really are confident that the policy is pretty good the way that it's stated. There are some things that we would like to add that I want to share with you. In the first section under attendance records, it really only speaks to students needing to be in attendance half a day. That could be problematic with the language that is used in this particular edition because of our high school and our middle school being on block schedule. It is possible for a student to come to block 1, leave, and then come back for block 4 and still be there for half a day. And so I thought for clarification, it'd be a good idea to put not only for half a day, but 2 of the 4 blocks for block schedule. It's just clarification, that's all. There's also some change in this particular policy about late arrivals, we would call them tardies, and early dismissals, and I want to tell you and just speak this point publicly. Absences are a problem at times, and they're not a major problem for a majority of our families, but they are a problem at times. The greater problem is the number of tardies and late dismissals that we have, because instruction is being missed even though the students may be counted present. And this particular edition of Policy 4400 addresses that. And it allows for a limited number of tardies or late dismissals. I have added a line that I would like for you to consider. I would like for us to put in Section B that 5 cumulative late arrivals or early dismissals will be excused per school year by parent note. Only 5. There was no limitation on that in the original policy. And the second piece of that is that makeup work for late arrivals and early dismissals will follow the same guidance as excused or unexcused absences. Only excused absences permit makeup work, and there's a reason for that. It's to discourage people from missing without a legitimate excuse according to the compulsory attendance laws, okay? I would like for you to consider adding those 2 sentences, and I believe I've given you a copy with those in there, all right? I would also, under Section C, excused absences, like for us to add the phrase per school year for the number of signed parental guardian excuses. And the reason for that is this. There are some who would argue at the high school, because they have they're on block schedule with one group of classes in the fall and one group of classes in the spring, that you have a year of instruction in the fall and a year of instruction in the spring. Therefore, they can miss 5 in both sections using parent notes. That, in effect, gives them the opportunity to miss 10 days with simply a parent note. And then that creates a problem at the elementary schools, because those parents want to be able to do the same thing even though technically they're only allowed 5 per year. So what I've done is added per school year to make sure that our folks that are on block schedule understand that there are only 5 parent notes that are allowed for excuses for absence throughout the entire school calendar year. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay. I would suggest that we add that. The other piece that we need to be careful with is in section D. There are many people who will try to use the educational absence reason to take family vacations. We've run into that time and time again, and I would suggest that we add that family vacations do not qualify as educational school-related activities, but they will fall under the guidance of Section B, which is the 5 parent excuse notes. You understand what I'm saying? And I can give you a story about that. I could probably make a hunting trip educational using particular math exercises or writing exercises. But the truth of the matter is the educational quality of a hunting trip is significantly different than taking a trip to Spain that you might not ever see again. And this gives us the opportunity to distinguish between some of those things while not totally dismissing the opportunity for family vacations. Because we do have people who are employed in seasonal jobs and they may need to leave. We just feel like parents need to think carefully about when they're taking their students out of school. All right?
And would be making the decision? Principal?
Yes.
I'm glad you explained that latter part, because I would take even a 2-week trip if it were truly educational. Maybe a seminar at Duke or something that they're attending. That there is an exception to almost any rule you got.
Absolutely.
So
We're just trying to draw
right.
some of that in a little more tightly because one of, probably the most critical factor of being successful in school is coming to school. And we can track that and relate that.
And that also, the way you said that, I'm assuming that you got 5 notes, but there again, you could have a child with a chronic disease that has a continued doctor note that may be tardy 30 times.
That is over
That's
on
an
the,
exceptional. Yeah, I
that's
saw
on the
later
last
you
page.
addressed that somewhere,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
When you're talking about chronic health problems,
Right.
then the principal and the care team will work with the family and develop a plan. Yes.
Who's in charge of attendance at each school?
It's a joint effort. Primarily, it's charged to the social workers.
Okay.
There's a line in the compulsory attendance law that directly relates back to another statute speaking about social workers.
Okay.
That 5 signed parental excused, is that per day? That count as like if you miss 4 days in a row?
One note is 1 day. The intent is to limit it to 5 days missed that way. Now, there are other pieces, though. When Travis asked that question just now, that's a point of explanation that everyone needs to be clear about in the community. And that's where the regulation part that I was talking about a few minutes ago comes in. And after that policy, I shared with you our first thoughts about what we would put into that regulation. And the first statement is we want to make sure that there is consistent communication about attendance expectations to all of our parents. And we need to write that out. And it's got to be consistent across the district so that we don't have 2 sets of ideas at 2 schools. But there are some other qualifications that we have already started working through. My intent is before we come together on July the 19th is to bring our principals together and to look at this policy extensively and to write the administrative regulation piece and bring it to you for your review. But I would like for each of you to look at this policy very critically and to look at what we have already written as guidance for our administrative regulation and add your thoughts, please, so that we can have a discussion about that in July before we move forward anymore. And after we do all of that and get it into a finalized package, I want to send it in to Campbell Shapley and make sure that we're all within the boundaries that we should be. Okay, so I'm asking you tonight to look carefully at 4400 and also the administrative regulation piece and put your thoughts down, because this can be a critical policy for our families.
All right.
Okay? Any thoughts or questions about that?
Well, one of the things I wrote down, that kind of stood out to me is, it said if you miss too many days of suspension, you could have no more than, I think, 2 days suspension. Now, that's self-defeating.
I agree.
Now,
I
I don't know
am-
what kind of punishment you use.
Well, we would, there are multiple elements that would go into helping parents and students learn that they need to be at school. Anything that would be that punitive would be at the very bottom of a list of options. Jerry, I almost took my pen and marked through that,
Right.
because to me that seems like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
You know, we want kids to come to school, so we're going to send them home because they haven't. That makes no sense to me. And if you want us to strike that, I will do that very quickly with a big red pen.
My original thought would be, yeah, I don't see that you're going to suspend somebody if they're missing school. And I will point out, I did like that one thing, and you mentioned that, I think, on page 4G, where you had there, providing early outreach to families of students missing
Yes.
school, and identifying and addressing those barriers to attendance. And that's when I asked about who did that. That social worker would be great. I think that's key to the whole package a lot of times.
On that sheet where we were just writing out some administrative regulation ideas, at the very bottom of that,
Right.
there is a process that is already in place in some schools, but we want to expand it to all schools, so that after 5 days, we bring in mountain mediation and develop a contract with the family and the student. And even after 8 days, we bring in a truancy council that includes DJJ, it includes a court counselor, and sometimes we can bring in a judge. And we all sit around and say, this has gone far enough. The next step, we're looking at going to court. And at the same time, there's also the expectation in this policy that there's an incentive program that is developed at each level to encourage students to come to school. That's new. That wasn't in the old 4400. And so on this administrative regulation, the schools are charged with coming up with an incentive program to encourage students to be there. I think all of those pieces can work together as interventions, so that we really won't have to get to those final stages of, hopefully, court referral or especially suspension. But I want to go back. I would be pleased to strike that line.
Do we still have a requirement there that for after-school activities, band, ball playing, wherever it is?
Whatever.
They have to be in school that day,
That is going to be
unless there is
a valid excuse.
yeah.
That's going to go into a different policy that has to do with extracurricular activities, and will not only apply to athletics and band, but also driver's ed.
Okay.
Anything that's after school, they have to attend half a day. And we want to put that into a policy because it's been an unspoken expectation, but it's time to put that in black and white.
But in there again, there's got to be room for an exception. I'm thinking maybe, let's say football, and you've got a kid that is going to be able to play, but they've got to go for some kind of physical test or something. They're out that entire day related to that they're still eligible.
Well, if that's the case, then there would need to be a communication with the athletic director and the
Right.
principal
And there would
that
be.
would proactively make that happen. That was a question that I placed it to Sonia, what about if a person has something like that?
Right.
And she is in total agreement that there are going to be issues that you look at on an individual basis where it might not fall within the exact black and white, but there is some decision-making gray from there. In the compulsory attendance law, I think it's the very first paragraph, it talks about the fact that a principal has the option to excuse an absence, and then they can use their best judgment on that. So that's built in.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or questions? Please look at this seriously with me, because I want to make sure that we are as exhaustive on it as possible, okay? I've got to figure out where we are now.
On D.
You should have had in your packet these two presentations. One is from Cope Architecture. Cope Architecture has done quite a bit of extensive work for us, including the last project at the high school. And then another presentation from a company out of Asheville under the name Novus now. They've gone through a couple of transitions of ownership. We sent out a request for proposals to architecture firms and asked for them to put together a plan to come in and do a facilities study. We have about 50 buildings in Swain County Schools that they would be looking at and deciding perhaps what type of upgrades they need, what the mechanical pieces need, and then we'll bring a report back to us. After looking at those two proposals and also looking at a board policy, and I think it's 9210, I'm going to recommend to you in a little while that we go with Novus out of Asheville for this facilities study. I've spoken with them again today by phone. I believe that they will give us a very good product, and they're going to be able to probably fall within our price range of less than $100,000, which will come out of the ESSER money. And one of the reasons I believe that we need to go with them is because there is a clause or a statement in our board policy that says if a state, if someone presents a proposal from another state and that state has a preference for in-state organizations, that we are to honor that preference as well in our state. And Novus is from North Carolina. The other company is out of Tennessee. So I don't have anything against Tennessee, but I believe that within our policy obligations and also based on what I saw, that Novus is the best company for us to go with on that. So that'd be my recommendation. Do y'all have any thoughts or ideas, discussion on that?
When I looked at both of them, my first thought leaned more toward Cope because they've done so much work already. But then when I looked into it also, like in the Novus one, none of those faces that I recall seeing over there, and we talked to them before. And of course, Cope, all those folks change on a regular basis. We were talking about it a little bit before we started. That we were leaning more toward Cope, but I'm open. I mean, and of course, if one you think can service us better and less cost, then that obviously is going to be a factor.
Well, to be completely upfront, I don't know what the exact cost from either would be. The next step would they would come in and they would sit down with us and see what the scope of everything would be, and they would give us a price, which would then come back to you all.
Right.
But if you would prefer that we go with Cope, we can do that.
I'm not really that tied to either one. We were just talking about that based on their past work they've done. You know, we've got a lot of maps and stuff they've done, which is almost immaterial because some of it's already outdated and changed. What do you think, Cody?
For clarification, just a moment, do we know, because Cope is from Tennessee,
Mhm.
do they have a practice of granting preference to Tennessee residents?
Tennessee law has a preference
Okay.
of granting to Tennessee-based firms,
Okay.
yes.
I just wanted to clarify that real quick, because I think that was a prerequisite in the code, or in the policy code that you have there.
I don't know, Cody, it is binding in the policy that we go with the firm from North Carolina, but we at least have to give them strong consideration.
Do we know who Novus was going to be using as potential subcontractors and those in the area that may be used as well?
The companies that are listed in here will be their subcontractors.
Okay.
They were already listed as referenced.
I know Cope had used a lot of local contractors, so, but I didn't know about the Novus.
I saw them enough, I don't even know if I noticed where they were from. I do like the idea of doing this. I mean,
If memory serves, they listed basically the general contractor that they use as far as in the listing inside that book. Those general contractors would have their own individual list of subcontractors for that contract.
okay.
So the general contractors would probably be more likely to be the active listing inside.
Yes.
Rather than the subcontractor.
I think it's wise to do this. There is an attention federally and statewide on infrastructure.
It's critical.
Yeah, and there is a glimmer of hope that there may be some additional money out there in the near future and we've got some desperate needs.
And we need to have
Be ready.
documentation and data
Yes.
that would come from this to support
Right.
the decisions.
The last time we did this with Cope, I guess, was 7 years ago, wasn't it?
I don't
Wasn't it
remember,
14, or,
I don't remember having a facilities study.
we had at the high school, mainly the big study, and the middle school. And when,
I remember they came in and they helped with planning,
planning.
Expansion,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, wasn't in,
yes, and Cope was the design firm for that.
all right. Because we got some flack because they were wanting us to tear down the.
I
rock
know
buildings.
Novus, they had done some work for Macon County and also Henderson County.
Novus has, yes.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
We'll go either direction, it'll be your decision.
Well, you got more information on it than we do, so it's no big.
And if, after we have our initial meeting with them, if it doesn't come back the way that pleases us, we can always back up and look at the other company. Okay? I believe that those are all of the elements of discussion, unless there's anything else that anyone can remember. No? That would move us into our, action items. And, Mr. McKinney, if we're ready to go in that direction, I would recommend that the Swain County Board of Education approve the budget amendments as presented.
Do you have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion's carried.
I would also, as an addition, recommend that the Board of Education approve the continuing resolution for 2021-2022 as presented by Ms. Treadway.
Motion.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion's approved.
Do I have permission just to lump all of these board policies together?
Yes.
I would recommend that the Board of Education approve all of the board policies as listed, including the minor changes as approved by Campbell Shatley.
All right.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion's carried.
Now, I intend to recommend Novus unless you tell me to, unless you,
That's
we're
fine.
good. I would recommend that the Board of Education approve the facilities study from Novus Architecture for the next step, which would be a meeting to identify the scope of the work.
Okay,
So moved.
all right,
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion is carried.
Now, those are all of the action items other than personnel, and if you would like to go into closed session to discuss anything on personnel, which would include all of those, all the teachers and instructional pieces and the coaching hires. Didn't we put that in here? Mhm.
Number 6.
Number 6.
Right. Do you want to go into closed session?
Anybody wish to go to closed session?
Just a real quick question before we get started. Was it this? that you
Yes.
passed? Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's what we were talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's a need.
Okay.
All right,
And personnel, then I recommend the Swain County Board of Education employ Esther Lovey Fortner as cafeteria manager at Swain High School effective August 9th, 2021.
Motion.
Second.
any discussion? All right, all in favor by show of hands? Motion is carried.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education employ the following for the Kindergarten Academy: Ashley Barker, Candace DeWantera, and Landon Hunt.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion carried.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education employ Matthew Thadden as teacher at Swain Middle School effective August 9th, 2021. We got his background check today, so he's clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Motion.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion carried.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education employ Cheryl Green as teacher at Swain Middle School effective August 9th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion carried.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education accept the resignation of Teresa Hayes as CTE Director effective August 8th, 2021.
All right, we have a
Motion.
Second.
And second, any discussion? All in favor by show of hands? Motion approved.
A word of explanation before we go to number 6.
Right,
Campbell Shatley has changed the way that they recommend that we, can't use the word contract anymore, that we assign coaches. I gave to you an email with their explanation about that. That also precludes us at this point from offering any type of an assignment for more than 1 year at a time. I still would like for us to continue to look at ways to show appreciation and security for coaches as much as possible. But because that came from our lawyers, I feel like we need to honor that and go with coaching assignment a year at a time for now. That makes sense to you?
It does.
Okay. So based on that, I recommend the Swain County Board of Education approve the additional coaching duties as presented to you in that handout. Please note that there are some that are still empty. We have no junior varsity or varsity baseball coaches at this point. That's my girlfriend, and her name is Spam. And we also are still looking for a varsity assistant basketball coach. To my recollection, those are the only positions that were left open on that.
Girls or boys?
Girls, did I say boys?
Say either.
It was varsity girls. Okay?
we got any leads? Any interested?
Not to my knowledge. I had a conversation with Neil about that this morning, and we're still looking.
This young man we hired has been busy
Yes.
and seemed to be very positive about the output, what he's done so far with the kids.
I believe so. and we need to find a
We do.
way to support him,
Yeah.
and to provide security in all directions on that.
I mean, that also would include, if these that we approve, if we want to move them around, we still can do that.
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah, that's the question I had about looking at some of them. I'm sure some of them can be moved
Yes.
throughout the year.
Do we have to have a new assignment signed if the athletic director moves a coach?
It depends on if it yes, it would change the pay, if it would change their assignment.
Okay. So that would require an adjustment to the assignment. I keep wanting to say contract.
It might change the pay, and I guess it could not, it depends on, but yes, we like to keep that kind of thing current in our HRMS or our tracking software, so we know what people are being employed to do. So we'll be in action.
I'm thinking if we did have to move, if we did some kind of movement to the athletic directors, wanted to do somebody, and it was, say the movement was $200 less or something, we still have to honor that original pay.
I think
But
that
we
you
can
would,
still
yes.
make a move.
We've run into that before, when we had somebody to do JV baseball, didn't
Right.
have JV baseball, but we needed them to do middle school. So we moved them and honored the original contract. So that's something that we do have a precedent for,
Okay.
but we have honored the original contract in terms of the salary. But we have had to make note of the move inside our personnel tracking.
Well, as mentioned earlier about a JV, or a girls' basketball coach assistant, it is extremely hard to fill coaching positions anymore. Extremely hard. Especially when you get below the high school level.
No, the pay is,
Yeah,
as our lawyer said, it's minimal,
right.
and the stress is very high in the positions. So,
Well, I've noticed, this summer, we have several coaches working during the summer. And this track team that just won, boys and girls, what they did downstate, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of those coaches, they're out there in the fall and winter, working some of these kids. And so, yeah, we come nowhere near paying them adequately.
so I believe that I recommended that we hire them as presented. I don't remember if we had a motion or a second, or if you want me to
Not
go
yet.
down the list.
We just discussed it. I think.
Okay.
Does anybody want to go down the list? We've seen it. All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor by show of hands, motion's carried.
I recommend the Swain County Board of Education employ Sarah Boston as teacher at Swain East Elementary, effective August 9, 2021.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor by show of hands, motion's carried.
Mr. Dills, have I missed anything? Okay. Those are all of the action items, Mr. McKinney. Just want to draw your attention to a couple of things, and I probably need to add about 3. The next board meeting is July the 19th. It's a regular session meeting. The driver's ed contract, Ms. Treadway, would you explain the driver's ed contract for this year?
However, this is a renewal for the second year. We always do a request for proposals once every 2 years. So this is our second year renewal on that, and it's with WNC Driver's Ed. The price is $260 per student that completes the program. They do offer a 200-question test a couple times a year, and that class is also taught by the instructor. Anything else?
Does this include the Cherokee contract, or is that a separate contract that we do for them?
We do not contract them for Cherokee. We just reimburse Cherokee Central Schools for whatever they pay up to their maximum allotment from the state. So, but they do use the same company.
Stand right there, okay? That's just a point of information. I think you've already signed that. We just
Yeah.
want you to understand about that. We are going to be transferring some teachers. Jeff Marr is going to be going to the high school. We've been short a PE teacher there for several years now, and we have the opportunity to rectify that. He is also going to be serving as the Associate Athletic Director, which is something we had spoken about before. In his place at the middle school, Keith Payne is going to be coming out of the EC classroom and going to PE, and will also assume the athletic director responsibilities there. He'll also be working with Mr. Kerr in some administrative opportunities. Keith comes with an administrative degree, and we look forward to having him support us there. We have a financial pass-through, it's the best way that I know to say this, that comes from the Department of Public Instruction for an EC, Exceptional Children's Consultant. And Ms. Treadway, could you explain how that works so that everybody will understand?
Yes, so DPI reached out to us a couple of years ago about seeing if we would just be basically the fiscal agent for this. They fund the DPI EC consultant through, they pass it through federal funds, and we basically employ this person who serves the western region of North Carolina, and they pay also a 5% admin fee for us to do that. But we just basically handle the payroll and any employee reimbursement expenses that this person might have. The state provides them a car, provides I think a cell phone, those other administrative kind of things. We just handle the payroll piece of it.
Just want you to be aware that comes from someone and just goes straight out, okay? And you may see that on our budget somewhere.
It comes through as a memorandum of agreement with us and DPI. We also have another memorandum of agreement with DPI for learning curve consultants who does some professional development for literacy, I think at the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
They also do that throughout the western region, and DPI has asked us also to administer that contract, and we get an admin fee for that. So we've been
Questions
doing
about
for a
any of
couple
that?
years.
Our Larker property is in its fourth or fifth upset process right now. It started out, I believe, at $29,011 with Ichthus Ministries. We received an upset bid on Friday from Jessica Brock for $40,000. The next minimum bid will need to be $42,050. So the process is helping us. I'm not sure that everyone is super happy about the process working, but I just want to keep you informed on that. The next minimum upset bid will need to be into us by July the 6th at 11 a.m. And Ms. Treadway will be handling any upsets that come in between now and then, because Mr. Sale is going on vacation. Okay?
Good. Well, that process is by law.
Yes, it is
We
by
have any
law.
control over that.
Yes. And if anybody wants to know where the process is, we are posting it on our webpage every time there's an upset. Okay. And we have a vaccination clinic for our 12-year-old students and older on July the 19th through Blue Ridge Health. And I would seriously encourage anyone who is 12 and older to come and be vaccinated. That will give them the requisite 3 weeks that are required for the time until they can get their second vaccination and get all of that over before they come to school. I think that there is a possibility that we may start the school year with masks, although I know that a lot of people are not real happy with that. That may be the expectation, but that's because we will still have a significant portion of our students who are not vaccinated. So the way that we can combat that is to get as many as we can vaccinated before then, okay? I don't have a definitive statement on what the expectations will be because they haven't been released, and that won't be until July, later on, before we get the information.
Is the NCAA, not NCAA, North Carolina High School Athletic Association looked at any of that?
I don't have an answer for that. I imagine that they are, but they're probably waiting to see what Department of Health and Human Services do.
I mean, if all our athletes were vaccinated, we'd forget about masks for them wearing when they play.
I would think that would be an option. Well, I'll have to wait and see what those requirements are. I don't know. And again, I know that the fact that we may have masks, and that's prediction, may upset people. I understand that. But we have to follow the guidance that's given to us and then make decisions based upon what we feel is best. And I'll bring that to you as soon as I have it. Okay? Yes, sir.
I have one thing from public comment. I was asked if we knew, I know that we were waiting on some legislation potentially to completely solidify our schedule for next year.
Yes, sir.
And so that was asked when they would be able to know exactly the school schedule for next year.
I can't answer that question because that piece of legislation is still, it has been, I believe it has moved from the Senate to the House, but there has been no final statement on that, and that still needs to go to the governor. There are a lot of different pieces in that legislation. I know this much. The start date is solid.
And what is that?
I believe it's August the 16th for students. Am I correct, Mr. Dills?
Yes.
Okay.
August the 9th for staff.
For staff. Spring break is solid. It'll be the week before Easter.
Okay.
And I don't have any intent to change any of the Christmas days at all. Now, the rest of it is still in play
Okay.
because we'll have to meet the requisite 1,080 hours of instructional time. One of the big pieces, Cody, on that has to do with remote days. And that legislation severely limits our use of remote days. Okay?
Okay.
So you're looking at wearing masks, are they, I know you can't answer it right now, but as far as how many days a week, we're gonna go 5 days a week?
We're going 5 days a week, Travis. There's no reason for us not to, in my opinion.
Yep.
Is there an option that if you got a child that's has had the shot of not having to wear a mask, only those that are susceptible?
I hesitate to give an answer to that because here's the concern. We can't prove if a student has or has not had a shot. They could bring their card, or they could say that they lost it. That's the difficulty with that. Let's just wait and see what comes our direction.
I know, it's still, yeah, I've
Okay.
been reading the states doing it still. They don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going 5 days a week, looks like we could go without masks. But,
Perhaps it would be, again, I think that we need to wait and see what comes to us. And I can promise you that we will get legal guidance from our attorneys on what the options are.
And Allison?
Yes.
Okay.
And on that happy note, that's all I have.
Anything else? Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All right, all in favor, close your books and we're through.
Thank you all.
Thank you.